She was lying on the floor of her own bedroom, her nightgown torn open at the chest, and on the pillow next to her were neatly folded letters in which her stepbrother called her his wife. The Pearson family of Jasper, Indiana, has always seemed quiet and respectable. The house on the corner of Brookfield Street, a one-story home with a green lawn and white curtains, was for many years a model of quiet American life. The owners of the house, Margaret and Robert Pearson, married in the late 1970s and soon had children, Suzanne, their only daughter, and Andrew, Margaret's son from her first marriage. Robert died in 1988 of a heart attack, leaving his wife and children with a small house and modest savings. After his death, the family began to live a secluded life. Margaret worked as a cashier at a grocery store, Suzanne as an accountant at a local auto repair shop, and Andrew, then 19, often changed jobs and stayed with friends. Their life seemed smooth, without scandals or loud events. Neighbors described them as quiet and normal people. Everything changed in the spring of 1992 when Andrew, homeless after a row with his employer, returned to his mother's house. Margaret took it as a natural decision. "He's my son. He needs help," she told friends. For Suzanne, it was a surprise. According to colleagues, she was irritated for weeks, but attributed it to problems at home. At first, there was nothing unusual about Andrew's behavior. He helped around the house, worked part-time at a construction site, and watched TV in the living room in the evenings. But after a couple of months, Suzanne began to avoid her brother's presence. She stopped having dinner with them, increasingly locked herself in her room, and stayed late at work. In June of that year, a colleague noticed a photo on her desk in the office. Suzanne in a summer dress against the backdrop of a forest edge, with a man nearby whose face she had carefully covered with a postcard. The colleague joked, "New boyfriend?" But Suzanne snapped, "That's none of your business," and removed the photo. At the same time, Andrew began to exhibit strange behavior. His neighbor, Mrs. Hall, recalled, "I saw him standing by her window, late at night, smoking. He stood there for a long time. I thought he was waiting for someone, but then I noticed he was looking straight inside." By August 1992, the tension in the house was palpable. Margaret didn't notice, or didn't want to notice, the changes. She assumed the children were just not getting along. But Suzanne's diary found later recorded, "He touches me when my mother isn't looking. He says he loves me. I'm afraid to tell her. She won't believe me anyway." In early autumn, Andrew quit his job at the construction site and spent most of his time at home. Margaret worked late, and Suzanne spent her evenings under constant pressure. Her correspondence with her friend Tina, preserved in the case file, shows that the situation was becoming increasingly difficult. "He came into my room again without knocking. I told him to leave. He laughed. He said we were a family, but a real one like husband and wife. I can't live like this." By the end of the year, she tried to move out, looking for an apartment in a neighboring district, but it didn't work out. There wasn't enough money, and her mother was trying to persuade her not to abandon the family. Andrew, according to the investigation, began to keep a stack of letters written by Suzanne in fits of fear and confusion. The handwriting was hers. The content was personal. Requests to leave her alone, confessions that she didn't know how to stop what was happening. In early 1993, Suzanne tried to distance herself again, taking on extra work in the choir and often staying overnight at a friend's house. But by spring, Andrew, as it turned out later, had begun to follow her. Unsigned cards were found in her mailbox. "You are mine, always." On August 3rd, 1993, she returned home from choir rehearsal at about 10 in the evening. It was her last evening alive. Andrew was brought to the police station at noon. He walked in calmly, without any signs of excitement, and kept a cool head in front of the cameras, as if what was happening did not concern him. In the interrogation room, he sat still without showing any emotion, which immediately alerted the investigators. They had not seen such a cold reaction to the murder of his own sister for a long time. During interrogation, he denied all charges. He claimed that he had not seen Suzanne since the spring, that he had not communicated with her, and had nothing to do with what happened. However, the facts spoke otherwise. Fibers from the carpet from the deceased's bedroom were found on the shoes confiscated from his home. Traces of hair matching Suzanne's hairs were found on his jacket. Items belonging to her were found in his apartment. A children's toy from her room, a piece of fabric from her nightgown, and cosmetics that she used. Among the things was a knife with dried blood. An examination later confirmed the DNA match. While the interrogations were underway, forensic scientists analyzed materials from Suzanne's home. Among the personal letters, they found several written in her handwriting. in which she mentioned the sin that was eating away at her from the inside, and that they would both be destroyed if anyone found out. These lines became confirmation that there was a hidden connection between them that no one knew about. The autopsy results were another blow. Suzanne had traces of a powerful sleeping pill in her system that had not been in the house. There were injuries on her wrists that indicated she had been restrained with ropes. These facts confirmed that the murder had not been spontaneous. She had been held somewhere else, and her mother's house was just where it all ended. When the investigation released these details, the public was shocked. Residents of Jasper, accustomed to the tranquility of their small town, were confronted with a reality in which the facade of a quiet family concealed years of violence, perverted relationships, and a tragic end. The press turned the case into a national sensation, calling it the crime that shattered the myth of family values. Andrew was formally charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. His face, calm and impassive in all the photographs, became a symbol of the case. Investigators knew they were looking at more than just a criminal, but a man whose actions were the result of years of twisted relationships and hidden addiction. The investigation into the Pearson family's past resulted in a chain of discoveries that completely destroyed the initial picture of a quiet and prosperous life. Social services records showed that Margaret had come to the attention of the guardianship authorities several times in the early 1980s. The reports included complaints from neighbors, constant screams in the house, strange night visits from unknown men, long periods when little Andrew was left alone. The documents indicate that the case was closed due to lack of evidence, but for the first time, detectives began to wonder what exactly was happening within these walls long before the tragedy. Testimony from former neighbors and family acquaintances began to form a disturbing pattern. One neighbor, who lived next door in 1985, said he saw 10-year-old Andrew sleeping on the porch in the middle of the night. Then his mother brought him inside in the morning, holding the hand of a man he had never seen before. Others recalled Suzanne often carrying bruises as a child, which she attributed to falls down the stairs. No one officially confirmed the abuse, but investigators now understood that the family had lived for years behind a facade of decency, hiding the chaos within. The key discovery was an old box of documents found in the garage of Margaret's house. It contained letters and photographs dating back to the late 1980s. In some of the pictures, teenage Andrew was hugging little Suzanne too tightly, not in a childish way, and on one of the letters was her mother's handwriting. "You have to look after her. She's the only one we have left." This phrase became the starting point for the investigation, care that turned into a pathological attachment that no one controlled. Psychologists involved in the case noted that Andrew's growing up environment created the conditions for destructive patterns of behavior. A child deprived of stability and witnessing unclear, possibly violent events in the home formed a distorted idea of intimacy and power. When his half-sister came into his life, the relationship took on a character that he considered natural. Forensic examination confirmed that the first signs of Andrew's obsessive control were evident as a teenager. He interfered in Suzanne's personal life, forbade her to communicate with her friends, and staged jealous scenes even during her school years. The real shock came from Suzanne's diary entries, found in a secret drawer of her desk. In them, she described how Andrew first told her at 15 that they were meant to be together, and later, when she was 17, threatened to kill himself if she ever left home. The entries shed light on years of pressure, manipulation, and psychological abuse that those around her had either ignored or overlooked. The investigation revealed another detail. A few weeks before the murder, Suzanne had contacted a local women's crisis center. Her statement stated that a relative would not let her go, took her personal belongings, followed her, threatened her. But the statement remained without continuation. She did not give a name and did not come to a follow-up meeting. Now it was clear that she had tried to escape, but was unable to. All these facts made the case not just a criminal investigation, but a demonstration of how hidden traumas, ignored for years, can end in tragedy. There was no doubt for the investigation. The murder was not sudden. It was the end of a story that began long before that night. Andrew, who grew up in an atmosphere of chaos and destructive attachments, turned his sister into an object of complete dependence, and when he felt that he was losing her, he destroyed her. The Andrew Pearson trial began in January 1994 and immediately captured the nation's attention. Cameras filled the courtroom. Reporters filled every available corner, and viewers waited for details that seemed impossible to get any more horrific. But from the first days, it became clear that the case still held secrets that would change our understanding of what happened. The prosecution presented a full dossier on the case. The first evidence was photographs taken by forensic experts in Andrew's house, carefully laid out personal belongings of Suzanne, her underwear, old toys, letters. On the wall in his bedroom hung a map of the city on which all the places where she had ever gone were marked with red dots: work, the choir, a friend's house, even a bench in the city park where she liked to read books. Experts called it visualization of obsession. Next, Andrew's psychiatric evaluation was presented. The experts reported that he did not suffer from psychosis or schizophrenia, but had a severe personality disorder with a pathological dependence on control over the object of affection. He did not simply perceive Suzanne as a woman, he considered her a part of himself, his property. This came as a shock to the courtroom. Before them was not a madman, but a cold-blooded, calculating man, justifying his actions with the logic of owner's rights. The most telling testimony came from forensic scientists about the place where Suzanne was held before her death. It turned out that in Andrew's garage, under a concrete slab, there was a hidden room, a small windowless room with a mattress on the floor and a metal ring built into the wall for attaching ropes. On the walls were fingernail marks and inscriptions scratched with an object similar to a nail. "Let someone find me. I want to go home." These photographs were shown to the jury. Several people in the courtroom could not stand it and left the trial. Prosecutors presented other evidence too. One tape found in Andrew's apartment contained his voice, calm, almost gentle, saying, "You know, no one will let us be together. I'll make sure you never leave." Experts confirmed the authenticity of the tape. That was the tipping point. The defense had no room to maneuver. Margaret Pearson, the mother of the defendant and the deceased, was called to the court as a witness. Her testimony was unexpected. She admitted that she knew about the tense relationship between the children, but did not interfere because she was afraid of breaking up the family. This answer caused a storm of indignation in society. The newspapers wrote, "The silence of the mother killed the daughter." The verdict was pronounced in complete silence. Andrew was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, sexual assault, and aggravated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. When the judge said these words, Andrew only smiled slightly. No tears, no emotion. It was clear to everyone present, this man felt no guilt. After the trial, a wave of discussion and condemnation began in the city. People demanded reforms in the work of social services, asked how something like this could have been hidden for so many years. But for the Pearson family, there was nothing left. The house was sold, Margaret left the state, and Andrew's name became a symbol of the fact that hidden cruelty can live nearby for years, behind walls that seem safe. After the verdict, it seemed that the story was over. Andrew Pearson went to a maximum security prison, and Suzanne became the symbol of a victim whose life was destroyed by the walls of her own home. But the events after the trial were no less horrific than the crime itself. Several months after Andrew's incarceration, reports of his behavior came to the prison. The prison administration reported that he showed no signs of remorse. Moreover, drawings and inscriptions dedicated to Suzanne were found in his cell. On the wall, he had written in charcoal, "She is still with me." In the prison library, he kept a book on marriage rights and bookmarked pages describing vows of fidelity until death. Psychiatrists who examined him again noted that his addiction had not died down, but had merely transformed. He began to idealize what had happened, imagining himself as a husband who protected his wife from the world. The public was shocked by a new twist in the story when journalists published previously classified investigative materials. Among them were letters Andrew had written shortly before the murder. In them, he detailed plans to make their love eternal and free her from doubt. This caused a wave of indignation and discussions across the country. Families of domestic violence victims demanded reform, and politicians used the case in election campaigns, promising to never again allow tragedies hidden behind a facade of decency. Meanwhile, Margaret Pearson, the mother of the victim and the killer, disappeared from view. It was later learned that she was living under a different name in a neighboring state. Reporters found her 2 years after the trial. She lived in a small trailer on the outskirts of town and refused to give interviews. Neighbors said that she did not communicate with people and walked daily to an old bridge outside of town. where she stood alone for hours. Only one photograph was found in her house, a picture of Suzanne and Andrew as children, sitting next to each other on the porch of that very house in Jasper. In 1997, an event occurred that once again exploded in the media. In the prison where Andrew was being held, one of the prisoners killed him during morning rounds. The reason for the attack was that Andrew tried to talk about his wife with a cellmate and offered to share the experience with him. The killer said, "I couldn't listen to him talk about what he had done as if it were something holy." This death did not bring relief to the public. On the contrary, it left a feeling of incompleteness, as if the evil he embodied had not been eradicated, but simply disappeared from view. After Andrew's death, the Pearson family's former home in Jasper sat empty for nearly a decade. No one wanted to buy it, even at a discounted price. Residents avoided the house, and children told stories of the girl who was still waiting there. In 2005, the house was torn down. A truck stop was built in its place, but old-timers claimed that a woman's cries could sometimes be heard there at night. The case forever changed the way American society viewed the concept of family secrets. It became an example of how silence, fear, and ignoring clear signs can lead to disaster. Suzanne's name became a symbol in campaigns against domestic violence, and the photo of a smiling choir girl became a reminder that calm facades can hide the darkest stories. The story of the Pearson family ended without winners. One child grew up to be a monster, another died at his hands, and a mother afraid to admit the truth was left with the ghosts of the past. This was not just a criminal act, it was a slow-moving tragedy that destroyed everyone connected to this house long before blood was spilled. By the mid-2000s, the Pearson case had become part of criminology and psychiatry curricula. Students were shown photographs from the case in lectures, a children's toy found among Andrew's personal belongings, a map of Suzanne's routes, notes of her pleas for help that were never heard. It became a textbook example of how domestic violence can develop over years, undetected, until it reaches a point of no return. In Jasper, the town where the family's home once stood, they tried not to talk about it, but silence didn't help. On the site of the former home, now in the territory of a truck stop, anonymous messages were recorded several times. Someone wrote, "She's here," in chalk on the asphalt. The police considered it teenage pranks, but for locals, it was a reminder the past cannot be erased by tearing down walls. In 2010, a Chicago journalist produced a documentary about the case. It featured full excerpts from Suzanne's diary for the first time. These words became emblematic of the story. "I wake up every day thinking it will end, but it never does. I live in someone else's shadow in my own house. If I disappear, no one will notice." After the film's release, the US was engulfed in a new wave of public indignation. The system for protecting victims was criticized, and reforms were demanded. Congress discussed changes to legislation on protection from domestic violence, directly referring to the Pearson case. Margaret Pearson died in 2013 alone in a nursing home. Only 3 staff members attended the funeral. No friends, no family. The only thing found in her personal effects was an old photograph of Suzanne and Andrew on the porch, smiling as if everything in their lives was perfect. The photograph was archived with the rest of the case materials and became its final illustration. Today, Suzanne Pearson's name is more than just a victim's name. It's a reminder that terror can grow in silence, in a house with a neat lawn and curtains on the windows, among people everyone considers ordinary. Every time a story appears in the news about a woman killed by a loved one, someone thinks of Jasper and the girl no one could save. This story has not received justice in the usual sense. The killer is dead, but his shadow lives on in society, forcing us to ask again and again, how many more houses like this are standing next to us while we pretend that nothing is happening?